All right, so we got a special one tonight. We got Scott Adams with us. He's the author of probably Darren's favorite book, and definitely one of my favorites as well.
It's up there for sure.
Couple of favorite books here. How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. And he's also got another book, Win Bigly. Scott Adams he's been pushing out a podcast as well. It was what's the live feed there? Periscope. He had Coffee with Scott Adams through Periscope, and now he's putting it on podcast. So we get to hear him pretty much every day, and he's got a common sense approach to like figuring out the persuasion and, from both sides of what we're dealing with in the world today. So we're going to talk about all that stuff and self-improvement. And we're super happy to have you on the show, Scott. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Like I was saying, like Darren, I think the book, like how to fail at almost everything and still win big. I remember where I was listening to it on audio.
Did I listen to it first?
Yeah, and then I think you listened to it and then read it. But
yeah,
I think that book has probably had the biggest impact I've seen on Darren since we've been doing this for like 5 years.
That one or No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Yeah,
are the two probably out of the last like 50 books. Well, those are the two most profound books I've read in my life. I go back and forth. I just read the one again, actually. Or I listened to it, and I just finished it today. How to Fail at Everything and Still Win. That one I've listened to probably 4 times now. I find that one's good to listen to, like, once or twice a year and sort of reinvest or reconnect with some of the content in there. So yeah, we'll probably, a lot of people have been hearing you probably talk about your new stuff all over the place lately, but this one will probably be touching back on that one quite a bit because it was a pretty big book around here anyway.
Wow. Great. It's good to hear.
Yeah. So where do you want to start, buddy?
We'll start on the things that affected you in the book the most, maybe, and Scott can expand on those.
Well, I think probably, now I can't remember how to pronounce the name of the syndrome that you had come down with when you weren't able to draw your comics.
It was a spasmodic dysphonia, which was the voice problem, but a focal dystonia, which is sort of a cousin condition, affected my drawing hand.
Yeah, I think that's when I really sort of focused in the book, and I was like, whoa, because I mean, obviously, I don't know how much you know about our show, but we tend to spend a lot of time talking about the woo-woo subjects and the stuff that you kind of can get yourself into trouble for talking about a little too much. But I mean, around here we focus on that side of the universe. So as soon as I seen this book sort of starting to touch on that realm a little bit here and there, and kind of using your hacking, it's almost like an early version of biohacking too, and being able to rewire your brain to beat, a condition that you'd been told there was no cure for. I was wondering if you could just kind of give our listeners a little rundown of that scenario.
Yeah, so a little background. People don't know necessarily that I'm a trained hypnotist and also
That's right.
studied the ways of persuasion for decades. And so when I have problems, I often think, well, how could I rewire my brain to make a difference? And the story you're talking about was I lost the ability to use my drawing hand for several weeks, maybe months. And what would happen is my pinky would spasm as soon as I touched my hand down to paper with a pen in it. And of course, if your job is drawing, that's a really, really big problem. Now, as luck would have it, the world expert on that specific condition was a doctor at the Kaiser Health facility that I actually go to. So it was a weird coincidence that the expert was local. And so I went to him and said, okay, I got this spasm problem. And he diagnosed it right away. Oh, yeah, that's a focal dystonia. I deal with those all the time. It's usually musicians or anybody who uses their hand in the same way a lot. And I said, all right, great. So what's the cure? And he said, quit your job. And that was it. That was the best science and the medical community had to offer, which was, there's nothing we could do about it. Quit your job. But they suspected it was a brain malfunction as opposed to a physical hand problem. So I agreed to help them experiment with a variety of different things, from biofeedback to physical therapy on the hand to exercises, etc. None of those made any difference. But I was working my day job at the time. This is when I was working my day job while doing the Dilbert comic nights and weekends. And I started just touching a pen to paper very briefly, just tapping it and then taking my hand away before the spasms started. And I would just do that for hours at a time with, if I was in a meeting, I'd just touch the paper and then take my hand away and touch it and take it away. And I would just do that the entire meeting until eventually I could hold the pen on the paper for 2 seconds, which was actually a lot. And then I kept doing it for 2 seconds until I could do it for 5. And somewhere around 10 seconds, my brain rewired and it just took that problem away. And now I can reproduce the problem. If I were to overuse my hand for a period, I would get it back because I've been close to that before. So I know that it's always that risk. But I was in the literature, I believe, according to my doctor, as the first known solution to that problem.
Wow.
And that it was a brain hack. And the way that I could confirm it was a brain problem and not a hand problem is that when I tried to draw left-handed, I'm mildly ambidextrous. So I thought, well, worst case scenario, I'll learn to draw left-handed better than I can. So some of the Dilbert comics were actually drawn left-handed during that time. But what I noticed is when I put my left hand, which did not have the problem, down to the paper, my right hand would spasm. So it was literally simply watching my hand touch a piece of paper was enough to make the other hand spasm. So that's how you know it was a brain problem. And brains are very elastic. So if you do the right combination of things, in this case, I was just doing the things that worked, meaning touching the paper before the spasm happened. And I would do it so many times that my brain just got apparently wired to do that. And it became my new habit, and the old habit just went away.
Yeah, that's a great story. So did that affect your path from there on? Like, did that make you, look at things differently, change your attitude about things? Or was that part of the genesis to like getting to this book finally? Not finally, but you know what I mean?
I've never connected these dots before. So your question is sort of perfect. You know how sometimes bad luck leads to something good? You would never choose the bad luck,
Yep.
But sometimes it opens up a door. And there were a couple things that happened because of it. One of them was that a second time my hand started to hurt. And I thought, oh no, I've overused it again. I might recreate this problem. I started looking for another way to draw. And so I searched online and imagined that there was probably at this point some kind of a computer tablet situation. And because it was a brain problem, I reasoned that if I drew with the same hand that had a problem, with a stylus instead of a pen and on a computer device instead of paper, that my brain might not recognize it as drawing.
Yeah.
And sure enough, there was a device called the Wacom Cintiq. Wacom is the company. And it was fairly new, and I got a demo model. They sent me one right away. And sure enough, I could draw like a regular artist draws. And because it wasn't a piece of paper, my brain didn't recognize it as a problem. And so here's the good news. Moving to the technology well before other cartoonists were doing it, it's fairly common to draw this way now using that same device. But at the time, I didn't know anybody who was doing it. But it probably cut my total workload by 50%. So there was a learning curve, but once I learned to draw with a computer, it just can do so many things of, resizing and copying and pasting. And there are just so many advantages. To draw a straight line is the easiest thing in the world. So that was the first advantage. So the bad news with my hand led to a 50% decrease in my workload. You can't get much better than that. But the second thing that happened was years later, when I lost my voice to a mysterious and incurable, we thought, problem called a vocal dystonia. And my doctors were baffled. They didn't know what it was. They didn't have a name for it. I figured that out by Googling it eventually. True story. But there was no cure. Nobody knew what it was. They thought it was a mental problem, etc. And one day, just in a moment of inspiration, I thought, I wonder if it has anything to do with that hand problem I had years ago, because they both had that same muscle spasm quality to them, but different parts of the body. So I Googled the term vocal dystonia, and that was close enough for Google to kick up spasmodic dysphonia. Different words, but there's enough of a connection that it found them. And then I played a video, a little audio, video clip of somebody with my same problem. And the moment I heard it, I thought, that's it. I found it, because it was somebody who had the exact same problem talking in the same way. And so I took that to my doctor. Now I had a name for it. That allowed me to follow this path to the one doctor in the world, one doctor who had an experimental surgery. And I went to visit him. He was down at UCLA, Dr. Gerald Burke. And he had cured a number of people, but it was still very experimental. Sometimes things went worse. So for some amount of people, maybe 15%, they might get worse and lose their chance to ever get better by the surgery. But other people got good results. So I decided to do the surgery. And as you can tell, my voice returned. So I managed to cure effectively, if you can call it that, 2 incurable problems, one with my hand and then later with my voice. But I probably would have taken much longer and maybe never figured out what was wrong with my voice. And by the way, a lot of people who have this condition never figure out what the name of it is, and therefore can never seek treatment. So the hand problem probably saved my voice, which was a much bigger deal than even the hand problem was. So 2 huge pieces of good luck, getting my voice back and then cutting my workload by half, because I had an incurable medical problem that I also cured. So talk about things working out right.
Yeah, no kidding.
And then I think with the voice problems, I think you were like that is by that time is when you had started touching into affirmations and things like that. So, I mean, obviously it seems like
I'd been doing affirmations for most of my life. And for those who don't know what that means, it just means repeating or writing down a specific vision of what you want to happen. So before I was rich, or before I was a cartoonist, I was saying, I, Scott Adams, will be a syndicated cartoonist. And that happened. I said, I, Scott Adams, will have a #1 best-selling book. And that happened. I said, I, Scott Adams, will speak perfectly when I couldn't speak at all. So I would repeat that in a way that nobody could understand except me, because I couldn't actually speak. But every time I drove, I would just repeat, I, Scott Adams, will speak perfectly. Now, I never spoke perfectly before, even before I had the problem. I didn't have a great voice. But now I do these periscopes, the online streaming video every day. And one of the most common comments I get is people say how much they like my voice. and that wasn't true before. Before, nobody said that, because part of recovering from that problem was learning proper voice technique. So I came out ahead voice-wise because I know how to produce proper voice as part of the process of making sure I don't re-injure my vocal cords. So I came out ahead on that too.
So did that also change? So all those things, like getting over those obstacles and all, did that end up leading towards your book? Like having all that stuff happen, I mean, did that really change your paradigm at all?
My life has been so unusual for my entire, really, including childhood. The number of things which have happened to me seem so far beyond what coincidence could explain, that either this is a giant simulation and somehow I've learned how to program it, or there's something to affirmations, or it's just some kind of weird selective memory that makes me think things are happening for me, but maybe they aren't. So whatever the answer is, it's really interesting, but we don't know exactly what that is. All I know is that the number of things that have happened in my life that go just way beyond anything normal, it's just hard to explain through normal means.
Now, have you noticed that happening outside of affirmations, or is it? I mean, I guess selective memory would be a big thing there, but is that does that crazy things, has it always been happening, or do you notice it more when you kind of tune into it?
Well, the affirmations have preceded some amazing coincidences. I talk about some of them in the book, but I'll just mention. Well, before I had any money, before I was a cartoonist, I thought, well, I'm going to try an affirmation that I'll get together with a particular woman at work who was way out of my league, and I didn't even work in her department, and it seemed impossible. And then this huge series of coincidences happened that just put us together a bunch of times. And the next thing you know, I was going out with her. And I thought, well, okay, maybe I just underestimated my awesomeness, and that wasn't such a hard goal. And maybe I'm more appealing than I think I am. So maybe that wasn't, unusual. So I thought, well, I'll try it with money. So I started an affirmation that I would get rich in the stock market. And I did that every day for a while. And one day I woke up literally in the middle of the night from not even a dream. I just sat up in my bed thinking, buy Chrysler stock. Now, this was a long time ago, and it was when Chrysler stock was in sort of a bankruptcy or near it, whatever the exact words were. And nobody was buying that stock. It was at its lowest point. And I tried to open a stock account to buy it, but my application got lost in the mail back when things had to be mailed. And I didn't get it in time, and the stock started going up. I don't know, maybe it went up 10 or 20% in the time it took me to sign up for the account. And I thought, darn, I was right, but I was too late. So I didn't buy it because I thought the big gain was the 10 or 20% that I had just observed. But Chrysler became the biggest gaining stock of the entire year. So I think there are 10 or 20,000 stocks in the world. I picked for my first try. I'd never bought a stock before that. For my first try, I had obsessed for no obvious reason. I had done no research. It wasn't on the top of my mind. I had no connection to Chrysler. I'd somehow come up with the one stock out of 10 or 20,000 that was the number one stock. So I thought, well, I missed the boat. I should have trusted that. I should have acted on it. So I thought, well, I'll just try it again. So I tried it again and waited for another inspiration. And one day I picked up the newspaper and I was flipping through, and there was an ad for a new stock offering, a company called Ask, A-S-K, some kind of a software company. Now, I didn't know what they did except software. I had no knowledge about this company, but it just, for some reason, felt right. So I put maybe $1,000 into it, and immediately it went up, I don't know, 10 or 20%. And I thought, wow, that happened in about 2 weeks. I'm a genius. If I could keep this up, look how rich I would be. I seem to be the smartest investor in the world. So I sold it, made my, I don't know, $200 or whatever I made. And I thought, woo, I'm a genius. And that stock continued up to be one of the biggest story stocks of that entire year. It was in a very small number of stocks that were the biggest gainers for the whole year. And had I held it, it would have been a pretty good deal. So after those experiences, I started thinking, hey, why don't I just try to become a famous cartoonist? Now, I didn't do it right away, but when my corporate career eventually fizzled, which wasn't long after, I started doing that affirmation. I, Scott Adams, will be a famous cartoonist. I think that was the exact words. And here we are.
Wow. See, that's funny. I forgot about, after reading the book, that
I do affirmations every day, by the way, now. So.
I forgot there was those strange coincidences. And it really does fit with, like, so many of our guests have gone on their path through, like, a bunch of synchronicities and strange coincidences. It really does. It does.
Yeah,
fit.
It's funny because I hadn't read Scott's book in about 6 months or 8 months since I had last looked at it, but I've read about 20 other books in the last couple of months, and so many of them are tapping into this common thread, and then listening to Scott's book again kind of summed it all up. Before we start to move on, I was wondering if you could give us sort of. I really like your approach to the sort of the systems versus goal-based outlooks on life, and how goals are kind of set you up to start doubting, self-doubting, and among other things. And I was wondering if you could kind of explain that theory to us, or hypothesis to us quickly.
Yeah, so one of the big themes of that book, that How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, is that systems are better than goals. Goals have a few problems. One of the problems is you don't really know exactly what would be your best outcome. So if you pick a goal in our fast-moving, ever-changing world, and let's say it takes you a few months to accomplish your goal, by the time you get there, there's a very high likelihood that something else was a better thing to have done. So you've got to be nimble, and goals lock you in a little bit, and they give you tunnel vision for the goal, which is really why you have them. You pick a goal so that you can focus on it, but that focus necessarily comes out of something, and that means that you might not notice other opportunities. So that's the first problem. The other problem is that if you're using willpower, let's say you're trying to improve your fitness or your diet, and you're saying, okay, my goal is to lose weight, and I'm going to do it by just putting that spoon down. I'm going to push myself away from the table. I'm going to try hard to resist that cookie. Well, we know that people don't do that very well. That's a process that is very flawed. Compare that to a system in which you take it as a lifelong process to learn as much as you can about which foods are better for you and which are worse. For example, if you wade into it a little bit, you would discover that pasta is better for you, at least in terms of weight, just specifically weight, than a plain white russet potato. Now, if you didn't know that, you would say, I like potatoes, I like pasta, I'll have a potato. But once you do know that, you say, I like them both the same, I'll have the pasta. It doesn't spike my blood sugar the way the potato does. And if you knew, for example, that eating peanuts is very correlated with maintaining or losing weight, because apparently they're just very satisfying. That's why eating a Snickers is somewhat satisfying. If you knew that, then you would have another technique that could help you control your appetite. So learning what foods you enjoy that are also good over time, continuously experimenting, continuously learning, making sure you at least skim any article that says, hey, we learned a new thing about nutrition, at least skim it, find out what that's about. And once you have a base of knowledge about what to do and how to flavor your food so it tastes good and where to find it, a body of knowledge that you've built up over the years, it becomes actually easy to maintain your weight. It's because you've developed just good habits and you have good knowledge about what choices to make. I noticed, for example, just sticking with the weight element of it, and by the way, this would apply to any category. I'm just using it for losing weight. I would go out to dinner, and it would be typical that several of the adults at the table were trying to lose weight or were at least interested in that. And I would look at their choices, just look at what's on their plate. And it would be completely obvious that the people trying to lose weight had no chance because they didn't know what to put on their plate. And they thought they were making good choices, but they would often be terrible choices. And I'd look at the people who were thin and keeping the weight off, and their choices were all exactly the right things for someone who's trying to maintain the weight or lose. And I thought, oh my God, it's not willpower. You think it's willpower, but it's not. It's knowledge. The people with the most knowledge, it's easy. Well, once you reach some minimum level of knowledge, keeping weight off is actually fairly trivial. I found for the last 15 or 20 years of my life, when I should be gaining weight, I reached some of my lowest weight as an adult, and it was all lean muscle. And it was all based on knowledge, and none of it was based on willpower.
The problem I have with that, or the difficulty I see, is, and I use bacon and egg sandwich as an example. I've been eating a lot of those, but if I was eating a bacon egg sandwich 20 years ago, bacon would have been the bad thing, and between now and 20 years ago, eggs have been good and bad over time. And now bread is the bad part and bacon and eggs are the good part. Yeah. So, how do you sift through all the crap?
So I don't think that what I've described could have worked even 15 years ago.
Oh, okay.
It's something that really only can be done in the past 5-ish years, because we finally figured out, we're a lot smarter about what's good for you and what isn't. But what I also, beyond that, I recommend that people use their body as a little, a lab, and they just try stuff.
Yeah.
So if you think the keto diet, you think you want to give that a shot, I say try it, see if it works. So you may just A/B test your way into something that works, independent of what the science is telling you at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it is. I do think it is changing. I mean, especially with the health and wellness and the biohacking community and all the science that they're doing with the stuff. It really does seem to be a little clearer now.
Yeah.
So where do you want to...
and I also advise people weigh themselves every day as part of a system. The old thinking was, if you look good in the mirror, you're good. But I think you want to catch it. You want to catch 1 pound difference, because if you're doing it every day, even 1 pound difference will actually influence what you order for lunch. And if you didn't weigh yourself, you'd think, I'm okay. Well, I'll get the French fries.
I'm going to start.
Pretty soon your mirror will tell you.
I'm going to start it. No, but you're
by the time your mirror tells you, it's a little too late.
That's a good point too.
Aren't they coming out with smart mirrors now? That they're going to be able to tell you when you're like
When
in
your
trouble.
love handles are getting big.
Yeah, they're like you're getting weight done, lot.
Well, also health. Apparently, there's science now that they can look at your face and detect actually health problems.
Wow, and smell your breath probably too. I think that'll be one. All kinds of things. Huh. So where do you want to go from here, Darren?
I guess we should probably start. The other thing I want to touch on before we jump into the persuasion stuff is.
Oh, hang on a sec. I have a question about the goals and the affirmations, because
Okay,
when
go.
you said, it does make sense to me, the systematic approach. I mean, I've had certain jobs that it's really important to follow a system. Instead of having a goal to complete something in the job, following a system will get you there. But the affirmation itself sounds like a goal.
Yeah, I always recommend that people use affirmations that are general enough to give them some flexibility.
Okay.
So a bad affirmation is, I will make $100,000 by November. A good affirmation is, I will be wealthy, or I will get rich, or I will get a promotion, without specifying promotion to what, or I'll get a better job without specifying what job that is. So the more you can leave it open, probably the better chance you've got.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, Darren, what were you going to say?
That really ties in with the Dale Carnegie stuff. It's crazy.
Old school.
Yeah. And then didn't you get some of your public speaking stuff from a Carnegie course?
Yeah, the Dale Carnegie course is insanely powerful. I recommend it to everybody. It was one of the maybe top 2 or 3 educational things I've ever done, and it was just an evening course for a few hours, a few times a week, for a few weeks. So in terms of investment, it was small. In terms of payoff, it's just enormous, just life-changing enormity that never stops being important. I mean, they teach you how to be comfortable in front of a crowd. Now think about how many people are afraid of talking in front of a crowd, and then think about how many people's careers and life, they would have so many more options if they could be the one to stand in front of the crowd and do it confidently. And the Dale Carnegie course also taught you how to just make conversation with strangers, which is the most frightening thing in the world if you're an introvert, as I am naturally. But once you learn the technique, you start looking at people who have good social skills and you say, hey, they're using the technique. Now, they don't think of it as technique. It's just something they learn from probably family or friends, something they learn from their parents. And they're just acting the way they've seen other people act. But if you didn't have that model, you don't realize that there's technique involved, and it's fairly formulaic in terms of how to approach somebody comfortably and make them feel comfortable and how to do all that. So between the ability to speak in public and to also speak privately to strangers and be comfortable, it's completely life altering.
It's crazy too. And he gets into the affirmation stuff too. That Carnegie guy was pretty switched on.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Yeah, he was ahead of his time.
I think my mom took that course in the 80s, I think. And she came back. It was really, she would call it, now it's mindfulness, right? But she would say, I'm internal. Like she would be, that was, I think that was from the Carnegie course. I'm not sure, but she took a couple other ones too, but really trying to become present. And that's kind of where I learned about, being in the moment or mindfulness. Cause she would always say like, oh, sorry, I'm internal, which means like she's in her head, that she's not being present.
Would you say that your hypnosis course was up there on the list of most important things?
Yeah, I usually put that in the top 2 with the Dale Carnegie course. So when you learn hypnosis, some of it is used directly to hypnotize people, and you do that to earn your certification. You've got to hypnotize a lot of willing subjects. But the important part that came out of that was not that skill, because it's not something you use very often, but simply understanding how people are wired, and specifically what I call the moist robot view of the world. And that is the moist robot idea, is that humans are essentially just wet robots, the blood part making us wet, and that they can be reprogrammed. And there's more and more science that backs that up. Brains are far more programmable and modifiable than we used to imagine, and now it's fairly common knowledge. So learning that early allowed me to see people acting irrationally and to put it in perspective, which is, without the hypnosis training, if I saw somebody ignoring facts and arguing some way that looked crazy or emotional, I would say, well, if I use my facts and I've got good sources and I use my reason and common sense, I can convince this person. That never works. Maybe it's worked somewhere, but it so rarely works that reason and facts will change anybody's mind, that until you've actually gone through a sort of a hypnosis kind of experience, learning it in particular, you don't understand how irrational people are and how susceptible they are to suggestion. And once you see that context, you see somebody who's literally looks crazy to you, you can tell yourself a few things. Number one, I'm not going to change their mind by my logic and my facts. It's just not going to happen. Number two, I look like that to other people. And that's a huge awareness jump. The moment you say to yourself, it's not just other people, I look just like that to them. And they can't change my mind with their facts and reason either. Once you get that, you're at another level of understanding your world, and you can operate more efficiently because you understand it more clearly. It gives you, just better vision on what's really happening. So when I want to influence somebody, for example, instead of saying, here's my facts and my reasons, I'll start agreeing with them. It's like, oh, you feel like that? Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, the science does back up what you're saying. And I'll agree with as much of it as possible until they feel comfortable with me and we have some trust. Because you can't communicate at all until you develop trust. Because otherwise people will hear your words and they'll say, yeah, you're lying to me, or yeah, you're just saying that because, or you don't really believe that. They have to trust you before they trust the words and can actually hear them the way you're presenting them. So I will first build trust, and then that's just one of the tools of persuasion. There are lots of others, but then I'll dip into my toolbox to figure out what to do from that point on. But it is a completely different approach than the old approach where I thought, well, people are basically rational. So if I give them a good reason and a good argument, I'm going to change their mind. Never happens.
How important is it for you to agree with them on the stuff that you genuinely agree with, or do you just fake your way through agreeing with stuff that you don't really agree with? Like, is that something that you have to, keep in mind?
It's really hard to fake that. So what I do is I try to find some way that I can agree with it honestly.
Genuinely, yeah.
People will pick it up. If you're not genuine on that, they'll sense it. People are pretty good at sensing somebody who's trying to pull one over on them. Yeah. So the trick, if you will, with pacing is that it's not a trick. The trick is you say things that are true.
Yeah.
If you say things that are not true and you're trying to pace, that's probably going to blow up on you.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, Darren, do you want to touch on something, or I can keep going on?
No,
that,
you
that
go ahead.
vein?
You go, keep going.
So that's one of the things I appreciate about listening to your coffee talks and some of your other stuff is that common sense approach to how we're being persuaded, and you can see from both sides that the persuasion's happening on both sides, and there's a middle where the facts are very, very hard to find, and people can just take what they want from their side to reinforce their worldview, and they're off on that side, and then there's other people taking information from that same thing and reinforcing their view on the other side, and I really appreciate your sort of middle approach. I mean, I don't know if you would consider that, but that's the way I feel about it.
Well, keep in mind also that we're alive in an amazing time, because that when that Yanni versus Laurel audio illusion started sweeping the world, and everybody was listening to it, that was one of those times where people could see that there could be two movies playing on the same screen, and it doesn't mean one of you is crazy. That was a point where people thought, oh my goodness, my reality is more subjective than I ever imagined, because I'm standing right next to somebody who's having a completely different experience, hearing exactly the same sound and interpreting it differently. And then you take that into you take what you've learned from that into the real world, the larger world, and you look at, for example, the FISA warrant for Carter Page. Now it's complicated, and you have to kind of be a lawyer to understand it, and there's lots of redactions. So when you have such a gray area possibility, what you observed was people confidently saying, this document proves my side, and that the other side is wrong. And the other side would say, you can look right at the document. It proves I'm right and you're wrong. Both of them looking at the same document with completely different interpretations. In the old days, I would have said, oh, okay, that's one of those sides knows they're lying, but they're just protecting their brand or their side or trying to win.
Yep.
That's the old way I used to look at it. A more enlightened way to look at it is both sides are absolutely honest. That's what they see. They actually see two completely different realities on the same page, just like Yanni and Laurel. And once you understand that that's the normal way of the world, it's not the exception. That Yanni and Laurel thing, if you learn something from it, you learn that that's the typical way your entire perception of reality goes. You have developed your own little brand of reality that probably doesn't have as much in common with somebody else's as you imagine it would.
Yeah.
And once you realize that, you just operate at a higher level.
And the problem is most of these headline stories and all the things that are, in our social media and all that, is full of ambiguity. I mean, they're prime suspects for this problem.
Yeah, I predicted a couple of years ago when Trump entered the election cycle, I said, this is going to be bigger than politics. And I said this a number of times because I wanted people to remember I had said it. And I kept saying, he's not going to just change politics. He's going to change the way we view reality itself. And in particular, you're going to figure out that facts don't matter for our perceptions and our decisions like you think they do. Now, facts, of course, matter to the outcomes. If you walk in front of a truck, the truck hits you, you're dead. But in terms of deciding whether to cross the street or not, you're probably not using anything like reason or logic. But if I put a gun to your head and said, are you using reason and logic? You would say, I sure am. Bam. Because it's a lie. It's not a lie. It's just a bad perception. You think you're logical, but you're not. My favorite example is common sense. You hear this phrase all the time. So-and-so has common sense or doesn't have common sense or should have common sense. But if there were a thing called common sense,
it wouldn't be common.
We would agree on a lot more things because I'm pretty sure there are plenty of adults, above some IQ, some minimum IQ that have this thing called common sense. And we can look at the same facts and apply our common sense and get, diametrically opposed interpretations. So common sense is a complete hallucination. Nothing like that exists in reality. But we're all under the impression that not only does it exist, but thank God I got some. Like, I feel sorry for those poor people who didn't get any of that common sense, but I'm full of it. Everything I do makes sense to me.
I wonder if there's people out there that think they don't have it. They're like, I don't have the common sense. I'm not there.
They're just at that level of
Yeah, they're
awareness.
just like, I know it. I know I'm fucked.
Yeah, and the weird thing is, somebody who maybe wasn't very smart might actually say that, but in a weird way, they'd be ahead of a lot of the world just with that realism alone.
So do you think so that's kind of divisible, I guess, into, as you take certain factors out, you can kind of get into, start going from 7 billion different dimensions or movies playing to, like, how many different dimensions do you think exist in America right now? Is it 350 million, one for each person? Like, it's definitely seems to be more than just the right and the left these days, but it seems like, people are using the exact same evidence to use both sides of, or three different sides of an argument.
Yeah, there's certainly a different flavor for every human because we're all filtering the world through our personal experiences. That's where our filters get built, by experience. Because we think we're good at pattern recognition, but we're actually terrible at it. So we think, well, the last 3 times I did this, I got this outcome. That must be, I guess there's a reason. I'll do that again. But we're terrible at knowing the difference between confirmation bias, coincidence, luck, other factors. We're just terrible at that. So we're walking around confused all the time. But as far as the left and right go, it's very rare that you'll encounter somebody who expresses a political opinion and you can't identify it as being exactly what you heard on CNN or exactly what you heard on Fox News. So almost never do you encounter somebody whose idea you think, well, I've never heard that before about, the president or the government or any big policy. Every opinion seems to be suspiciously close to what the media closest to your side is framing. So that should be your first hint that we don't have free will and logic and common sense in the way we've always imagined we do. But you show me the people who have independent political opinions that don't sound exactly like the talking heads, and then I'd say, well, maybe that person has something extra going on there.
We talked a little bit before we started recording about like just watching the news. I mean, that's something that you do, is you deconstruct the news, and you obviously you try to keep a partial view of it. But how do you not let that affect you? I mean, I have a hard time. I get pretty discouraged, and I know, there's people on each side expressing their views honestly because that's what they believe. But then there's also a side of deception and purposeful, bullshitting and lying there. Like, how do you separate all that? How do you stay somewhat detached with appreciation to that? I don't think I could do it.
Well, have you noticed, and I'll answer your question, it'll sound like I'm not here for a moment. Have you noticed that President Trump, who is the most criticized human who has ever lived, who isn't named actually Hitler, the most criticized person in the world, he always seems to be in a good mood. Have you ever noticed that? Like, somehow it doesn't seem to affect him. Now, what you said was some version of that for me as well. And I would say, absolutely, the news doesn't get me down. Even bad news doesn't get me down. But both the president and I had the same childhood influence, which was Norman Vincent Peale, who was a great author who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking, which is what I employ, which is just making sure my thoughts are oriented toward positive things. And you see the president doing exactly the same thing. Norman Vincent Peale, beyond being one of the most influential authors in American history, was also, by weird coincidence, President Trump's childhood pastor at his church. So he got to hear this message up close and from the source. And there's no way that didn't affect him, because you can see Norman Vincent Peale's fingerprints all over President Trump. I mean, he is just unnaturally positive about how well things are going to go. Now, he also has a good persuasion talent stack, so he knows that acting positive in that way actually gets things to move that way. So creating things through optimism. The economy is the best example. If you think it's going to go well, you invest today because you don't want to miss out on all this good stuff that's going to happen. And it's the investing today that actually makes it go well.
Yeah.
So if you can convince everybody, hey, things are going great now and they're going to go greater tomorrow, then it actually happens. So he's actually willing into existence things that weren't going to happen on their own, literally by thinking them into existence and persuading enough people to think in the same direction that they act on it. And that's a big part of the reason that I imagined he would be successful. He has that talent.
Yeah.
Is that when you joined the alt-right?
So yeah, I don't talk about the alt-right. I'm not one of those guys. I'm not even sure they exist anymore. I feel like nobody is. They're part of the alt-right anymore. But I never was. I'm socially left of Bernie, but I do appreciate the president's powers of persuasion. So, you know, it's not an accident that he and I have an unnatural ability to withstand intense criticism and bad news and potential doom. A lot of that has to do with a preference to keep our minds on a positive kind of a plane.
I was joking, by the way. We've been accused of alt-right more than once around here for just talking about you. If you say Trump, you get in trouble these days. So you're saying I should read this book? We actually have The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale on the shelf, and I haven't read it yet. Should I put that to the front of my pile?
You know, I don't know. I haven't seen it in a while, so I don't know if it holds up in terms of the modern mind and whether it's written in a way that you would find compatible. Certainly for a historical perspective, you should definitely dig into it a little bit. But there are probably, my book How to Fail captures a lot of the
most
essence
of it.
Tony Robbins would be the modern prophet of that way of thinking. The summary of Tony Robbins' act, if you can call it that. And by the way, Tony Robbins is the real thing. I haven't taken his course, but I know enough about what he does. He also has a background that traces back to the same hypnotists where I got my training, at least in terms of influence, not the actual person. And what he does is teaches people how to change their minds to change the world. If you get your mind right, then things start working out for you. And that's very real and very powerful. And people who go to his courses will tell you it does change them.
And this has been going on for, I've got a book here that I read, The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn. And that's like early 1900s stuff. She's talking about the exact same stuff. I'll forward that to you, Darren.
Really?
Yeah. There's people writing about that a long time ago.
Yeah, I feel like there are some things that get just rediscovered every few years, and then there's a new book. But yes, people have been onto this for a long time.
Yeah.
It's funny. I predicted President Trump very early as well. I got a lot of shit for it, a lot of shit. And but I honestly don't know what it was, but for some reason, I didn't know any of the stuff you knew. I just guessed. But for some reason, as soon as I seen him do a couple of those things, I was like, this guy's just going all the way, man. There's no fucking stopping him.
Yeah, you can pick up on his charisma pretty quickly. And that's, that was a good indicator. Now there's the young politician whose name I can never remember, Alexandria Octavia-Cortez.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
And people are asking me, hey, is she the next master persuader, as I've labeled Trump? And I've said yes, but untrained, meaning that she has the raw material and she's likely to pick up skills as she goes. But one of the tells for that is that although she is, by any objective standard, she's somewhat insignificant because it's a minor office that she hasn't even been elected to yet. But people can't stop talking about her, and even the right, who are her natural enemies, can't stop talking about how they have to stop her. And she hasn't done anything yet. She just has that Trump-like charisma that you can't look away. And that's probably 50% of persuasion, is making sure that people will focus on what you want them to focus on and not what somebody else wants you to focus on. Focus is, by far the biggest element of persuasion. And if somebody can control your thoughts and make you think about what they want you to think about, and she can do that, then you have to be really worried if you're on the other team. So I think Republicans need to be really worried if she keeps accumulating skills. She doesn't have the full stack yet, but I see nothing that would stop her from getting one.
So what about the mainstream media and how, we talked about how negative it is against Trump, and over the last couple of years when you've been watching this, when you're seeing that, I feel like they're gonna, if they continue on this path, it's gonna blow up in their face. Like everything they get upset about Trump for, you can look back and you can see Obama or Clinton or both Clintons or somebody else saying that even worse. Like I feel like in this day and age, when somebody can pull a clip together of, showing the exact opposite of what they're saying, it's got to start falling apart.
You're assuming humans are rational.
Well, but if you look at recent experiences and you just say, okay, did President Trump do something good and useful for North Korea? Everybody in the right would say, well, duh, obviously, we're about ready to nuke each other. Now we're just making friends, and, maybe we'll get some people back, and we got hostages back, and everybody's talking friendly. We're even talking about reunification of all things. We've got Russia on our side, China on our side. Like just about everything is heading in the right direction in North Korea. And it'll take a long time, if even in the best of worlds, it's going to take a long time to build trust and actually get it there. But if you ask somebody who's an anti-Trumper what happened in North Korea, they'll say, well, Trump got played. He got played. How embarrassing. And I'll say, what? What news are you watching? Because to me, it looks like every single thing is heading in the right direction. And they'll say things like, well, look at all the things we gave up. We gave them prestige for nothing. We stopped doing our war games for nothing. We got nothing out of that. And I'll say, you realize that both sides have given absolutely nothing that can't be taken back in a heartbeat. In other words, nobody has given anybody anything, but both sides have done a number of confidence building moves that are really about getting to know you. So remember, I talked earlier about before you can communicate, you have to build trust. So these little things they're doing that are easily reversible, like maybe North Korea will blow up a facility that wasn't that important to begin with. Maybe we'll say we won't do war games, but we weren't going to do them until the fall anyway. And we could ramp them up anytime we want. We've given Kim Jong-un, great respect on the world stage, but President Trump could, pull that rug out anytime it had to be pulled out. He could go back to not respected in a day and a half. So nobody's given up anything. But in terms of the trust building exercises of, well, I'll do a little bit here. I will honestly try to help you get some of the veteran, the bodies back, the fallen. We'll say, we'll do something symbolic too. Those are all very important for building the trust. And that looks like hugely positive steps. But if you think, if you say to yourself, well, clearly there will be these objective things that happen where you can say to the other side, see, I told you it was going to go this way. The other side is not going to say, well, yeah, you got a good point. I see the facts. It's very objective. They're going to say, oh no, you're looking at the wrong facts. You've looked in the wrong direction. Everything is just the way I said it would go. And at any moment now, North Korea is going to nuke us or some ridiculous thing. So I would almost give up on the thought that people are going to see the facts the way you see them. It's unlikely that that's going to happen for the majority of people. Certainly not for the media, because the media's business model requires them to take a side and not the side of truth. So the best you could probably do, and I guess the good news is that the country is so evenly split that if you can move, maybe 2% of the people from one camp to the other, well, you're president. If you can move 2% to the other camp, well, you can get some big bills passed through Congress. So you don't have to influence everybody, which is a good thing because most people are just immovable. There's no amount of facts or argument that's going to change them at all. But there are enough people who weren't paying attention, they weren't invested, they didn't have any emotion in it, who are just sort of tuning in and tuning out. And if they tune in at the time you've got the better argument, maybe you sway them.
What about the escalation of the polarization, though? I mean, I do worry, and we're sitting up here in Canada, and Darren hasn't been paying attention lately to the mainstream. I'm sort of trying to keep attention on it a little bit without getting too disturbed, but I feel like there's a chance that it's going to escalate even more. I mean, and especially when the violence is starting to happen and it's not being called out by the leaders on either side, especially the left. I mean, to me, that there's no excuse in violence that's not in self-defense, and nobody's calling them out. So how can that keep happening without it getting to some?
Well, I'll tell you, this will be the point where I'll regret saying this.
Sorry, you don't have to say anything.
But no, I was waiting for the right time. Maybe this is the right time.
Okay.
We'll try this out.
Okay.
The two parties have brands, and those brands shift over time. Right now, Republicans are sort of a Trump brand at the moment. They didn't start out that way. And the anti-Trumpers have, I think accidentally, developed a brand where Trump's brand is America first, and the anti-Trumpers, this is the part I'm going to get in trouble for, it's women first. Now, I'm not saying that is a negative, but I'm saying that if you looked at the people that they're most likely to put forward as their leaders, there's the Hillarys, there's the Pelosi's, the Warrens, the
Maxine Waters.
Kamala Harris. Yeah, Maxine Waters. So it's a very female-centric brand, and a lot of their issues, from abortion to birth control, et cetera, have a specific female element to it, more female than male. And the Trump brand are the ones who are armed to the teeth, and they prefer, beards and muscles and, sort of pickup trucks kind of thing. Now, of course, these are gigantically gross generalizations, but here's my point. Have you noticed that the right, the Republicans, the conservatives, don't seem to be fighting back? And that all of the agitation, the craziness, and even the violence, which, fortunately, most of that has not been deadly violence. It's somebody grabs a hat, throws a soft drink in somebody's face, etc. And the right, which has far more firepower in every possible way, is holding off completely. And I think the good news is because they feel a power imbalance. In other words, if somebody who's 3 feet tall walks up to you and punches you, you never hit them back. It just doesn't occur to you that would even be, one of the options. And I think that the left, their brand is not strength. In other words, they've got a compassionate brand, let's put it that way. The right has more of a tough brand. So as long as most of the troublemaking is coming from the compassionate people who are really, they're acting out out of compassion. Yeah. In other words, they think we've got to do something about these bad people on the right to save the children in cages, to have health care. So it's a compassion-based emotional, turns into a little bit of physical outpouring. But I think the people on the right who have the power right now in terms of electoral power, and I think they just feel confident, because if the two sides were more evenly matched in at least this emotional power kind of way, that would be super dangerous. But am I wrong? It looks like the right is completely. Have you seen anybody in the right take a weapon out?
No, but that's exactly what kind of worries me, is that we're getting to a point where, if somebody pokes you in the ribs too many times, eventually you're just going to hammer them. So, that's what worries me. Like, it's got to.
Yeah, but I don't doubt that could happen in a onesie twosie situation.
Right.
There's somebody who's going to flip and go get the gun out of the truck. All right, there's a good chance that could happen, but you haven't seen anything even close to that, like not even a hint of that on the right, and that's all good news. because the right are the people who say, I'm not going to take my gun out unless it's self-defense. Like, short of that, it stays in the gun safe, the lock stays on, and I want to keep my guns. That's why I'm going to play it right. I'm going to play it, down the middle. I'm not going to threaten people who aren't threatening me. And I think they just feel confident. So I think the left's brand protects them because it's compassionate. There's a sort of a female first vibe to it. It's men and women, of course, but there's a female centric element to it that actually probably makes the chances of real violence on a large scale, I think, as close to zero as it could possibly get. Now, and again, the odds of individual people getting out of control is high, but the odds of anything like a civil war, mass civil unrest, almost impossible, because that requires two sides to fight, and only one side has any interest in it.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, that's really good. Interesting.
That is going to get you in trouble. You're right. That's okay, though. I like it. I think whatever starts, I think Portland could happen. Something could happen in Portland one day. For sure. I wouldn't go to Portland if I was you.
Yeah. I mean, the odds, I've actually stopped appearing in public because of the danger. And I don't know if this is just my personality, but when I think about somebody, attacking me, I'm really thinking I don't want to hurt anybody. I'm not really thinking about what's going to happen to me, because I have some weird feeling that I'll always be okay.
Yeah,
it's irrational, but that's the feeling. But I do worry that I could hurt somebody else if they gave me a good reason. So I don't appear in public because I don't want to put myself in that position. I've got one exception coming up, but it's for a good reason.
Huh. So is that kind of leads us into your daily coffee talk, that kind of thing. So is that sort of what you do on that? You want to describe to people now that you're on podcast format? Like, I wanted to get your take on that. Actually, we want to talk about the medium of podcasting. I heard a clip of you on the No Agenda show, and Darren and I were like, well, we should try and contact Scott again, because he's I don't know if he's realizing it now, or he's definitely getting into podcasting and the type of medium it is. I mean, when I found out I could learn about almost anything I want in the world for free while I'm driving or doing the dishes or whatever, I mean, that was I had this sort of addiction to learning things through podcasting. So now you're putting your daily coffee talk on there, and you want to talk a little bit about how you do that and deconstruct the news, and you kind of involve people in a live way, but then also put it in the feed that's going to reach probably many more people eventually.
Yeah, so the technology platform I'm using is something called Periscope. For people who don't know that, it's a video streaming product that's associated with Twitter. And you just have to turn on your phone or your device, and you're live to the world, or at least the people who want to watch you. And it's extremely personal because the comments are streaming by, and I'm interacting with the comments as I see them, but otherwise I'm presenting my ideas. And it's super casual. I don't have a length that it needs to be, which is very powerful. Yep. Because the big problem with TV news, for example, is that they argue and then they run out of time, and then you learn nothing. Yeah. So it's the great power of the podcast forum and the Periscope forum, is that you're done whenever you think you're done. That's it. However long that takes. And the other thing is the timing of it. So I try to front run the day's news. I don't front run all of it, but I'm at 7 a.m. on the West Coast. So it's early enough in the morning that if I do a good job of framing a topic, there's a good chance it's going to influence other people. Now, most of the major news organizations follow me or have people who follow me on Periscope. So if I come up with a good way to frame a topic, it enters the larger conversation, and it does it seamlessly because I got there first, and it was a frame that once you hear it, you go, oh yeah, that's actually a pretty good way to describe that. Now, that doesn't mean I do that every day, but that's the power of the medium, that a person just sitting literally in my pajamas. I don't shave. I haven't brushed my teeth yet. I'm in my pajamas, and I just have my cup of coffee and turn it on, And I've said that power in the world from sort of 2016 on isn't really political power in the old way it used to be, and it isn't money in the way it used to be, although obviously those are still sources of power. But the new form of power that's developing could be expressed as a product of how influential you are in terms of your tools. Do you have the technique of influence times the size of your platform? How many Twitter followers, how many Periscope followers, Facebook, etc. So I've got 250,000 Twitter followers, and most of the major media follows me on Periscope. And so if I say something good, using my persuasive ways, it's super powerful, and I can see things that I've framed rippling through the headlines all the time. So that's the exciting part, is that it's real, it's personal. It feels like friends when I'm on there. I see all my old friends and their comments, but yet it's super impactful if I do it right. And I don't do it right every time, but every now and then I can add something to the. I like to call it adding something to the portfolio of thoughts, to add a little diversity in terms of just a new way of looking at things. Specifically, I look at things through the persuasion filter, as I call it, and that's sort of a lens that most of the normal media doesn't use. So I feel it's additive.
Can you teach us how to persuade people to support the show?
Yes, they should support you because you're a show. That actually was a persuasion sentence. The book Influence teaches that people hear the word because, and they think that's a reason, even if what follows the word because is complete nonsense. So what I said was they should support you because you're a show. Doesn't mean, it makes no sense at all. But history would show that if you put that as a tagline, you would get more results than if you just said, please support me.
That's good to know.
You can't just trail off with because.
We never throw fucking because in there. No brainer. That's gold.
That's the number. Yeah, that's perfect.
So part of the way I sold my How to Fail book is in my blog. When I was doing a lot more blogging, I would always have a tagline at the end where I would do a different because, and I'd say, you should buy my book because it's Tuesday or whatever. And people were in on the joke pretty early because I explained what I was doing, but it still worked.
I think at that time I was tweeting you saying why you should come on the show, because that was when I first started my
your tweet storm?
My tweet storm on Scott Adams. Yeah. Before we run out of time, I was wondering, because you've been talking about a couple terms that have popped up into the lexicon now and are pretty popular, but I mean, you've been talking about some of these terms since before they were in the mainstream or in the ether, and they're cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias. And I was wondering if you could give our audience kind of a quick rundown of what those look like.
Yeah, like you said, it seems like everybody's using those words now, at least writers and pundits. They became common in the world of Trump. And it's because of that, the people realizing that the facts are not having the impact that they think facts should have. And confirmation biases are human bias to interpret all new information as coincidentally being exactly confirming of our original idea. So using the North Korea example, the people who think that President Trump will fail say, well, look, he got nothing, and Kim Jong-un played him for a fool. And the people who think that the president is talented and knows how to do this stuff say, look at all the progress. They're already talking nice, and you can see them, making progress. So confirmation bias is interpreting all new evidence as supporting what you already thought. The way you wish the world worked is that new information would at least sometimes change people's minds, but it happens so rarely. And indeed, if you're looking for when it happens and when it doesn't, if there's no emotion in a decision, facts work really well, and they will change people's opinions. But the moment there's a little bit of emotion, we become unmovable. And unfortunately, all the big questions have emotion. So everything in politics, everything in our personal life, everything in our career, those are all emotional. So in those cases, facts just don't work. But if you're talking to your mechanic and the mechanic says, hey, you got to do this or that, those are probably facts, and they probably will change what your decision is. You're going to take the cheap one that works. Cognitive dissonance, the other term you're hearing more of, that's the best way to explain that is that when there's something that you observe in the real world that counters something you believe to be true, especially if it's something you thought about yourself. So, for example, if you thought you were a smart person who knew things, and then information was presented to you that you were completely wrong about something, just unambiguously, totally wrong, it is normal and routine, and in fact, the most common experience for people to just have a weird hallucination that makes it all work again. So, for example, if somebody made a bad decision to take a job in which they had a 2-hour commute each way, the real reason they did that maybe is they didn't think it through. But since they think they're smart people, once that truth becomes evident and people say, why did you take a job with a 2-hour commute? That person is unlikely to say, I just didn't think about it. I guess I was dumb, because that would conflict with who they think they are. They're far more likely to say and actually believe it. This is the key point. They believe it. They say, I really like listening to podcasts, and it gives me 4 hours a day to enjoy my podcast while I'm in the car. Now, anybody listening into that would say to themselves, that's either crazy or it's a lie. But it's not either of those things. It's just the normal way people process inconsistencies with how they think the world should be with the evidence that's right in front of them. So when, for example, President Trump unexpectedly won the election, all the people who said that can't ever happen were triggered into cognitive dissonance. And what did they say? Did they say, I guess the polls were underestimating the number of people? They didn't say, I guess that President Trump did a better job than I thought. They said nothing like that. Those would have sounded like normal, typical, factual, even if it's wrong, they would have seemed like normal, factual things. What did they say?
It was Russia.
I think Putin did it.
Yeah.
I think Putin got him elected. Now, I'm not doubting that Putin was messing with our elections. I'm sure all the major countries are messing with each other's elections and processes all the time. So I take that as a given that there's messing going on in all directions. But you can't really identify what percentage of the outcome was because of anything Russia did. And when I looked at their Facebook ads, if you look at the actual ads themselves, they're so laughably poor that anybody who understands persuasion would say, all right, I'm pretty sure these ads didn't make a difference. And I feel pretty confident in saying that at least the ads made no difference at all.
Can you make an ad that would make a difference?
You can, but people are not good at nailing that on the first try. So someone who knew persuasion, knew marketing, knew sales, they're all related things. They could come up with some advertising ideas that they don't know which one would work the best, but they're all sort of at least reasonable. They use the technique. And then the next part is you just test it, because in the age of the internet, you can test all your messages within 5 minutes and you'll have an actual useful result.
Yeah.
Because people will click on it or not click on it. So it's the A/B testing, as it's called. You just continually, rapidly test stuff is where all the real power comes from, is the ability to test rapidly and adjust.
Or you could just get a bunch of dead people to vote, and people that are in the country illegally. That's a good way to influence elections too.
Oh boy.
That's harder. Yeah.
Way to go, Graham.
I had to say it. There's more messing on the other side. Believe me.
You think so?
Yeah.
What you mentioned that book Influence. Do you have any books you've read over your lifetime other than of course yours that you kind of think people should read? Maybe like 3 books you think we should read?
Yeah, the follow-up to Influence is just as good. It's called Persuasion, Pre-Suasion. And if you recall back in the summer of 2016, when suddenly everybody on the Clinton campaign side, including all the pundits that favored her, started simultaneously using the word dark. They said, that's a dark speech by that Trump.
Yeah.
It's a dark vision. Well, that's an example of persuasion, because if you're thinking about dark as a word, it brings with it every evil, bad thing, every scary movie, every monster, every bad thought. And then you say, well, his speech was dark. All of the bad feelings gets transferred over to the target of your persuasion. So that was probably straight out of the book Persuasion, and either was somebody who studied under Robert Cialdini, the author, or it could have been him. We don't know. I'm going to look at my bookshelf for the actual names of these books. You want to read Impossible to Ignore by Dr. Carmen Simon. It teaches you how to do presentations and essentially not just presentations, but how to be memorable. Teaches you how to stick out and stick in people's memory. Now, you can't persuade anybody if they don't remember you. So you need to be memorable. You have to get their attention. And that book teaches you how to do that. I use those techniques all the time. They're very powerful. You want Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, which teaches you a lot about how the brain works. You want a book by Charles Duhigg, New York Times writer, who wrote Habit, Habit, Habit. And that teaches you how to solve your own habits that you don't realize are habits, and also how to build habits that are useful, which is tremendously powerful and fits very much with the hypnosis and
the systems,
retraining your brain kind of theme. So those, I think those books would be the superstars in that space.
And then can you talk about your next book as well? Or can you say anything about that?
I can't talk about the next one. I've written all of 3 chapters, and my writing process is such that it could end up with a different theme than I started. So
okay.
I don't want to give away too much.
Okay, but there is another one to look forward to anyways, right? At some point.
Yes.
Okay.
If I'm lucky enough to finish it, and I expect I will. Yes.
Right on.
One other thing. So you've been talking about podcasts and the new medium a little bit lately. I was just kind of wondering what podcast you're listening to.
Well, Joe Rogan is always a favorite. I haven't listened to as many podcasts as I want to, so I've decided to actually do more of that. I kind of love listening to 1 or 2 people having a conversation with my headphones on, because you can walk around the house and it just feels like you're not lonely. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's so personal because of the rawness of it. If you listen to, let's say, broadcast news, well, today's news, something blew up, news at 11. It doesn't feel personal. It's just talking to the crowd. But the podcasts feel just like you're having a conversation with your friends, and they can't hear you when you talk. So Sam Harris has a great one, very popular, and Greg Gutfeld has a great podcast. I think I'll stick with those as my recommendations for now.
Can I make a prediction?
Well,
In about a year or 2, Scott won't be able to handle the mainstream news anymore because he'll be listening to podcasts, and then going back there will be just like fingernails on a chalkboard.
Oh, and your new podcast will be huge too. It's going to just get massive.
I watch the news the same reason that President Trump does, which is and he samples both sides, CNN and Fox, because they do a good job of not only synthesizing the news and sort of packaging it and making it bite-sized, but it also gives you an immediate idea how people are responding to the different ideas.
Yeah.
If somebody on one of the networks frames an issue this way, you can almost immediately tell if that will play in the whole country just by watching the pundits and the hosts deal with it. So it's hugely valuable to understand how the 2 major networks, news networks in particular, frame things.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
good point.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you should check out the No Agenda show. They definitely love your show. They play a lot of it over there, and they're one of the more popular ones, I would say.
Very similar. Deconstructing the media. And
Yeah, I think you'd like what they do over there, and they've got to be closing in on 1 million listeners over there. And you got to check out the Grimerica show. I hear it's great.
Yeah, I hear only good things.
Right on. So we should probably let you go there, Scott. I think, unless you want to say anything else, but I think we've covered everything. It's been great. We really appreciate you coming on and talking about your old stuff and the stuff that's really influenced us, over the last few years.
Yeah, and I'll give you a tease. There's some really good stuff coming between now and the end of the year. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Nice.
Perfect. I like that. Do you have any closing thoughts for our listeners?
Well, I would say listen to more podcasts and try to keep a positive long view. And if you feel that you're getting tense because of all the craziness in the news and people getting too excited, just remind yourself that all the things you thought were the end of the world a year ago were not the end of the world, but you were pretty sure they would be. You're probably in that same situation right now. That things look more important than they possibly could be. Things look more dangerous than they really are. And you could probably just relax a little bit because things are going pretty well right now.
Perfect. I like it. Nice and positive. Keep it upbeat. Well, thanks a bunch, Scott. We appreciate your time. And come back anytime. You got an open invitation.
Oh, yeah. Great. I loved it. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks,
okay.
buddy. Okay.
And sorry you can't see our video. That's kind of sucks. But,
yeah, we had a problem
waving.
with the new browser. So yeah,
it's always something.
Yeah,
It's always something.
See you later.
Okay.
Okay.
Ciao for now.
All right. Take care. Bye.
And that was a chat with the one and only Scott Adams. What'd you think, buddy?
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I was a little nervous for that one, of course, but it was good to talk to him.
I got to admit, I was a little nervous for that one, too. Yeah, a little bit.
Darn nervous. And that, why? Because you've read his books and you prepped more than normal.
That's probably why. That could be why.
Make you a bit nervous.
And because I've been chasing him down for a long time, and that it all kind of ties in. I mean, the guy created Dilbert. Right?
And I kind of wanted
Isn't Dilbert in like 4,000 different newspapers around the world? It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I remember reading Dilbert. Yep, way back when it was good. Yeah, I didn't want to like make the thing because that wasn't really what.
No, it's got nothing to do with what influenced us.
Yeah, but I really do like his new. It's good that it's in podcast format now. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to consume that way than Periscope. Periscope's tough.
Yeah, because sometimes I crave his that sort of what I feel like is just a different take on what's going on in the current events.
That's right. So yeah, that was a good one. One for the books. Support the show because we'd like you to support the show, and because if you don't, we're gonna have to do all sorts of stuff we don't want to do, and we don't want to do that. So just support the show because we're a show.
Okay, we'll think of another one next time.
You send in your becauses.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You know what? I'll put out a fucking tweet and a Facebook thing that says, "Why do you support the show?"
Because
and we'll get
a ...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll see what people say, and then we'll have
infinite number of things to
won't
use.
be infinite, but we'll get a few anyway. So support the show, grimerica.ca/support. It is really is the only way you're going to hear these sorts of conversation is in the podcast format. It's really the only way. And if you don't support them, then it makes it tough.
That's true.
So do what you can when you can, and join the chats, grimerica.ca/chats, and get off the social media.
I just thought of another reason to support the show, like a real one. Because if like you said, if podcasts don't get supported, eventually, like I'm surprised he's even allowed on Twitter in a way. I mean, there's so much banning and stuff going on Twitter and YouTube that eventually we could be shut down, we'll be licensed or something, and we will need an infrastructure, need a support network to keep going, really.
Yeah, and it's best to have it.
People without that will not be able to continue.
That's right.
So
if we ever need to start doing our self-hosting, it's nice to be in the position to be out in front of all that stuff.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. So support the show because. Yeah. All right, guys. Check out the show notes. Do all the stuff in there. Support the show. Rate the show. Share the show. And have some fucking good vibes for your weekend.
Right on,
all right, guys.
The positive long view.
There you go. I like that. All right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
And thanks to everybody. Are we thanking people that are still there live? Yeah, thanks. If there's anybody there.
For tuning in live.
Yeah.
Checking out the live show. We'll be back probably in, like 2 hours? Are we doing that one live, or are we done?
I don't know, actually.
It'll be audio
It
only,
won't be
but-
video. If we do it live, it'll be audio only, but it would be nice to get people's questions and takes on it if we
In
can
real time?
continue
Okay,
that.
so
That'll
we'll
be
be back in 2 hours.
That'll be about the Portland problem and a little bit in depth with somebody that's from there that kind
And
of
someone who's pissed off at me for opening up my mouth.
well, and then also about psychedelics and some of that.
Well, we'll agree
that
on some
going
stuff.
on, so.
That'll be a fun one.
Yeah.
Great. And we haven't decided whether or not that's going to go in the block budget or not yet. So you might want to tune in just so you can say you caught it. That'll be in 2 hours from now. 8:30, right?
Yep.
So that'll be 2 hours from now, motherfuckers. All right. Ciao. Kill it, Brody.